We are through 2 weeks of Legacy Leagues action here in the summer 23 season, and only 2 undefeated teams remain. There are 4 1-1 teams, and only 1 game this week was within single digits at the final margin. And that was probably a game that most people weren't expecting to be that close. But we're going to break down all the week 2 action here on the Postgame Show. Thanks for watching. I'm here with 4 of our intern analysts, and I'm back. You guys can't get rid of me that easily, but especially can't get rid of me on a week when I get to go right back at that other podcast that you guys are all listening to. And we'll get to how I know players are listening, specifically from what I heard from my team. So worst case, we have the Duje's boys listening because it's their podcast on the Low Post, and the Halfway Crooks are definitely paying attention because it was Duje boys week. And we'll get to that game second, because we have a more important game to talk about, guys. The Game Breakers take down Lob City. There's some key things to talk about in this game. Lob City, as we know, the defending champs, and the Game Breakers, I mean, I'll let you guys speak more on this. They led throughout. I would say for the most part, and a big part of that, not to overshadow the game, because they played well and held on in the fourth and put Lob City away. And again, we'll focus on that fourth quarter, but Colin Burns goes down early with an injury, and I don't even remember seeing him after the game. So whether he didn't go back in, I believe he finished with 2 points. So one of their better offensive players, one of their more important players for how they play, unavailable for most of the game. And I think that had a huge impact on the Game Breakers coming away with the 13-point win to be one of those 2-0 teams through 2 weeks. So guys, I know you all saw that game, and these teams are going to play again. Every team that played this week will play again in week 7, I believe. A little rivalry action going on. But for part 1 of this matchup between Lob City and the Game Breakers, we'll put some of the guys on the spot who were here last week. So we have Sydney, Ian, Owen, and Zach. Let's go to Ian first. We'll put him on the spot with this one, but you can touch on the Game Breakers and really how they were able to be successful against a Lob City team where we saw in week 1 win by 63 points, right? So you kind of see the difference of what a week can make, but it also has to do with their opponent, I'm sure. And Ian fighting off the cat, it's totally okay. But what happened, and allowed the Game Breakers to be so successful in week 1?
Yeah, well, like you said, having Lob City a man down as soon as the game started definitely you could see the momentum swing right away, and Game Breakers took advantage of that. And I think they just had the momentum. They were crashing the boards, and they just had it going for them. And I know both sides were complaining about the referee and the calls and weren't going the way they thought, but it just wasn't Lob City's day. But I have no doubt that they'll be bouncing back, and this is a matchup I look forward to see maybe in the playoffs later down the stretch.
Yeah, and let's get right to Owen. I mean, we're going to take a lot of time on this game, and hopefully we get another. We will see these teams play again, and if they play a third time, it'll be in the playoffs, late in the playoffs. Let's put it that way, because I think these are 2 of the best teams in the league, somewhere near the top of the league for sure. So Owen, even staying on that Game Breakers point, I mean, led by Gian Abadijan and Joe Secator, and some of those dunks, man. I mean, sign him up for the dunk contest now, right? Joe Secator, this is your official invite. All right. You get to take on Terrence, who's our defending champion for sure. And I already want to see it. We can fast forward, but in this game, they were hitting shots too, and so when the team is hitting shots, and they made 7 threes, I know they took a ton of them, but for the Game Breakers, Owen, what stood out to you in this one, and how they were able to get a double-digit win?
I think one of the main things that stood out in this game, as compared to the last game both these teams had, Lob City in their first game, week 1, was able to come away in the first quarter and just blow the team out and never look back. But in this game, the Game Breakers kept it close all the way through the first and weathered that storm initially. And then with the, like Ian said, the impact of Colin Burns not playing in the whole second, third, and fourth quarter, I think the Game Breakers were really able to keep weathering the storm and then eventually pull away and get a good win here to be at 2-0.
Yeah, and so let's kind of focus on that fourth quarter, right? Like we talked about, I mean, a double-digit win, and we can touch on Lob City here a little bit. We'll go over to Zach in a second, but, Lob City, after being down a player and Cody Crawford also not playing, so we'll put that out there as well. So undermanned Lob City team, but they did cut it to 5 early in the fourth quarter. At the end of the third, early in the fourth, it was a 2-possession game. Zach, kind of talking about Lob City, and I know we saw him last week and this week a little different, but Jose led the way for Lob City, but what was Lob City able to do really in that third, heading into the fourth quarter to make it interesting again and nearly erase that deficit?
I feel like it had to do with their size. They ran a lot of big man lineups with Mahmoud, which was a benefit and also a hindrance, I feel like, because there was a couple plays where he would stay back to complain to the ref, and it ended up with a lot of 4-on-3.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, that size usually plays to their advantage, right? So if it's not going to play to their advantage, and I think the game breakers took advantage of that, where getting out and running and kind of beating them down the floor before they can use that size. Sydney, even just on the fourth quarter, I mean, we kind of have focused in on both teams, but what in the fourth quarter, changed and what did the game breakers do or get back to doing to kind of finish the deal and get this win?
I think definitely with being the smaller team, they slowed them down, kept them away from the basket where they had a lot of dunks in the first week. So like definitely keeping them away from the rim there and getting those rebounds so they couldn't do like follow-up shots was definitely a major factor that they had going for them, and like their numbers that they took advantage of a lot.
Yeah, and so now we look ahead like we've talked about. Lob City falls to 1-1 and gets ready to take on the Ice Treys in week 3, who we'll get to in a second. The Ice Treys got their first win of the season in week 2, and the game breakers will take on Ball Don't Lie, who falls to 0-2 after playing 2 of the tougher teams. So that'll unfortunately continue for Ball Don't Lie in week 3. And let's get to the game where we get to kind of talk about some of the other media channels that we have going on here. But it was the halfway Crooks taking down the Duje's boys, and I definitely want to touch on the Duje's boys, their new addition who played very well, but the halfway Crooks, and the stats are a little misleading, which we'll get to in a second. Even just going by the Snapchat, it was around 10 heading into the fourth, and then it got blown open in the fourth quarter. So despite what the box score will say in a second, it was still a grind in the third, and then it really just kind of ballooned in the fourth quarter for the halfway Crooks. But we will get to Owen and Zach, who are on court 1 for this game. So we'll let Zach go first on this one, and even just talking about maybe what changed for the Duje's boys from week 1 and to week 2, and even for the halfway Crooks, who I think both teams looked different from what we saw in week 1. And I think that's a really good place to start, Zach, on this one, as the Crooks get their first win on the season.
Yeah, I think a big part of that had to do with them holding Lucas down to 11 points. He had 42 last week. It was like by far the highest scorer, and the defense, they clamped him down. He couldn't score as much, and they pulled away.
Yeah, and so even talking about Desmond Williams, who wasn't there in week 1 and hit 5 threes. So all of them that he shot looked good, and we can get some head nods from the crew on this one, because to be in your first game and to shoot it like that is definitely impressive. So we'll keep an eye on him. And the Low Post was saying, the over-under was set at 50-ish. And so if you took the under, you're the big winner on that one. I believe you're betting against Shane. So it's like a win-win. I mean, Shane, well, a lose-lose for Shane, unfortunately, who loses the game and is going to take a bath on the over-under for Desmond Williams. But yeah, Lucas held in check. And even just scrolling down, I mean, no team in week 2, and I can't even remember really week 1, no team in week 2 shot it well. We can look at 11 for 43 from 3, 25%, and we'll get to the halfway Crooks in a second. 5 for 19. Owen, if you want to touch on that. I mean, the halfway Crooks played at a different pace for sure, and of course I can brag. But what'd you see from them? And still, again, 5 for 19 from 3, so a lot of shots not falling from deep, but it was the attack. And speaking of size, right? I think it's safe to say the halfway Crooks size, they were able to take advantage of that much more this week than they did last week.
Yeah, 100% agree. They were just so much bigger, not so much bigger, but they played so much bigger than the Duje boys. And like you said, both teams really couldn't hit the 3, but it felt like the lid was over the basket for the Duje boys the entire game. Halfway Crooks were able to shoot 50% from in general, and the Duje boys only shot 32. So the ability to just hit efficient shots definitely helped them pull away from this game, because it wasn't always a blowout. The first half was a pretty close game, but then the lid stayed on for the Duje boys, and it came off for the halfway Crooks, and they were able to pull away.
Yeah, and I know just how I know about people who listen. I mean, it could be heard on the sideline like, oh, they picked the Duje's boys to win. You know, we had our spreads go out over the weekend for this one. And I mean, what'd you expect? A podcast run by Duje's boys picking the Duje's boys. I mean, yeah, you know, what'd you expect on that one? But that's how you know people listen. And I think that's what makes it fun and different, where you have that analysis and then people take it personally. And I know just, you know, the halfway Crooks being in the legal wild, the Duje's boys being in the legal wild, it's a factor. It's on the minds when it's going on. It's like, how the hell were we 7-point underdogs? You know what I mean? But shout out Dominique Langston, and who led the way with 17 and 12, and Spence Freeman. I mean, I've said it to him in person, so I don't mind saying it on the podcast. He took 2 threes. He was 1 of 2. That's the dream. 50% from Spence in the past, you know, has been called out for shooting too much. And it's not that they're bad shots, but as we saw this week, and you know, if Owen or Zach want to jump back in a second, I mean, when he's attacking, it's a different game, right? When the entire halfway Crooks team is attacking like that and not settling as much, it's a different game. And that was kind of the difference, I think, at least for the Duje's boys as well, who, you know, found themselves shooting a lot of threes, as we talked about, 43 attempted compared to 19 for the Crooks. And, you know, Desmond Williams led the way with 21 and Lucas 11, and then really everyone else under 10. And Brian Yarcy, his first game back, you know, 3 for 13 shooting. So that won't happen again. So, you know, we'll take that against us. But again, we'll see this team again in week 7. Anything else from Owen and Zach on this one?
Yeah, the halfway Crooks, they were able to stay patient this whole game. Yeah, they shot a few threes, but once the threes weren't falling, they decided to just take it straight to the hole and bury this team, and they did exactly that.
Yeah, very yeah, we'll get to your guys' favorite 1-1 teams in a second. And like I was, you know, saying last week, that's your chance to suck up. So just, you know, plan your case accordingly. But so next week for the halfway Crooks, they'll take on the Air Mambas, who are 0-2 after a close one. And the Duje's boys will take on the Rhode Island Warriors next week, which I'm excited for, especially after how things went in week 2. And we're going to save the Warriors for last because we had our closest game of the week in week 2 between the Ice Treys and Air Mambas. It was the Ice Treys by 3. As you guys have probably figured out, I was busy on court 1 during this time, so we'll let these guys break it down much more than me. But it was the Ice Treys getting their first win on the season. We heard from Nick Lemoyne after the game and talking about just really liking what he saw from his team. And so, you know, Sydney first here. I mean, it was a close one, you know, and I did watch the Snapchat and try to catch up. I mean, they made some plays down the stretch to kind of fend off the Air Mambas and seal the win. But what throughout the game, you know, were the Ice Treys doing well that helped them, you know, win in this close week 2 matchup?
I think definitely the communication helped compared to the Air Mambas. Like the Air Mambas were yelling at each other, like fighting with each other, which Ice Treys held their composures and were able to get those connecting passes and get those shots off that were really falling for them. So I feel like that was a big factor that helped them pull out the win, even in a close game like that.
Yeah, I mean, these are 2 newer teams, right? So it's still their second game. And so I can speak to that. Anytime there's new players, forget about a whole new team. It takes some time. And so I think some of that stuff's expected. But, you know, like you said, both teams battled and kept it interesting. I mean, speaking about the Air Mambas, 29 from Mario Valerio, who actually has played in this league, I believe, last season. And so, yeah, we'll take 29. That's for sure. And a player of the week nomination on the losing side because the game was so close. But Ian on the Ice Treys, and even, you know, really you can see a big third quarter there, 17-9 for the Ice Treys. What did they do right out of halftime, or what adjustments did they make to, you know, help them come back in the game and get the win?
Yeah, the Ice Treys had a very organized way of playing. Their offense was flowing in a smooth manner as opposed to the Air Mambas, and it was a pretty physical game, and it came down to defense. There was a lot of defensive highlights. It was going back and forth. It was very fast paced, and although the Air Mambas came up short, they definitely made some improvements from last week. Once they get that chemistry going and a more free flowing and smooth offense, I'll be excited to see what they can bring to the table in the weeks forward.
Yeah, and like we've talked about some of their matchups for next week, as far as who the Ice Treys and Air Mambas will play. But shout out to Nick Lemoyne and Luis Ortiz, 15 points apiece. as you can see there, and a little more balanced scoring. Terrence Gallo just attacking the rim, getting to the free throw line, and had a couple highlights this week that we will see for sure in the top plays. And like I talked about, Mario Valerio and then Olaji rolling with 11, and nobody else had more than 6 for the Air Mambas, right? So, a close one. And we'll talk about these teams more as well as we get into previewing week 3 a little bit. Let's get to the last game of week 2. And I feel like the score is a little closer than it felt just because of a little garbage time action, but the Rhode Island Warriors do take down Ball Don't Lie. They improved to 2-0. So there's your other undefeated team in the Rhode Island Warriors, who beat the halfway Crooks and now take down Ball Don't Lie. So they're sitting atop the standings with the Game Breakers. So we have some good teams to pick from for that 1-1 conversation, which we'll have in a second. But Rhode Island Warriors, again, two-headed monster. We have a feature coming out on Charles Alexander and Marvin Dowdell this week, and they both did interviews, and Marvin's just a nut when he's playing. I mean, talking about like he's the shooter, and then just yelling back at the team in a fun way, like, yeah, I'm going to shoot. I don't care if you guys know or not. So big win for the Warriors. And you can see there again, a huge second quarter. And so we'll go to Zach. And I know we were all kind of back on court 1 for this game. So Rhode Island Warriors, 2 weeks now you've seen them. What from both weeks, stands out and are they going to be able to challenge? We can kind of get to this after, what stands out from week 2, and then Zach, are they going to be able to challenge and stay atop these standings when they take on teams like Lob City and the Game Breakers and the Duje's boys in the upcoming weeks?
I think they will be, just because, like you said, Marvin and Charles, they're both very hot. They're both very well from 3 as well, although Charles only went 2 for 8, but they're one of the better 3-point shooting teams, and they're also not afraid for heat checks. They were taking some very deep threes and made a couple of them, but that's going to be hard to stop.
Yeah, and we'll get Owen back, in that second quarter, 22-5, as you can see there. And, Ball Don't Lie just not hitting some shots, and Rhode Island Warriors continuing their offensive pace with 2 players over 20 points. But Owen, that second quarter, anything stand out from there, how they were able to kind of build their lead and then never look back?
Yeah, so 22 points. Yeah, it's good for a quarter, but it's like average. But holding a team to 5 is just incredibly impressive. The Ball Don't Lie had 12 turnovers in this game, and it was all because of their stifling defense, and they're able to just pull away and get easy baskets. Of those 22, probably like 14 or 15 of them were wide open layups and dunks. This team just hounded them on the defensive end and then got easy looks. And after that, there was no chance they were going to stop them.
Yeah, and shout out, as we see the stats here, Nick Pacquiao and Ozan Sarmik with 16 apiece, but that's really, really it for Ball Don't Lie. Ellis, who's a good shooter, 1 for 7, so that would have helped if he could have hit a few more of those. And it always comes down to if you make more shots, right? I mean, that you could say that for any team, but 8 for 29 for the Warriors. They had 5 guys, and they were outrunning Ball Don't Lie for most of this game, I think is safe to say. And like I said, Rhode Island Warriors 2-0, and Air Mambas and Ball Don't Lie still looking for their first win on the season. Again, Ball Don't Lie taking on the Game Breakers next week, and the Warriors get the Duje's boys in week 3. So let's get to some of the fun stuff. First, we'll start with those 1-1 teams, and you can watch all 4 of the 1-1 teams in action. We're going to be doing some live streaming next week. If it breaks and it ends up not happening, I don't know what to tell you all, because we're going to give it a shot and we'll make it work. But if we're going to be live on YouTube, and it's youtube.com/legacy_league. So you can go right there, search Legacy Leagues. We come up and follow us. And then all the games will be live next week. We have a scoreboard on the screen, so hopefully that'll work and you'll be able to follow along with the score and watch the games live, in addition to our Snapchat highlights starting next week, now that our new cast of analysts are all up to speed on how things work on game night. So we'll be introducing that next week and doing more highlights and some new segments as well. But guys, we'll let each of you guys jump in, so if you want to get ready. But like I said, 4 1-1 teams. We have the Duje's boys, again, who lost in week 2. Lob City lost in week 2. And then 2 teams who won in week 2, the Ice Treys, like we just talked about, and the halfway Crooks. So you guys can pick some of the same team, pick who you really think. We'll put some of the repeat post-game show people on the spot first. Owen just talked. So we're going to Ian. All right. he didn't suck up last week. I'm not saying you always have to pick the damn halfway crooks, but it's not a bad pick. But who is your favorite 1-1 team? And again, 6 games to go, so a long way to go. But which team, Ian, are you keeping your eye on that, you don't expect to be 1-1 for long?
I think I'm going to take the team you guys just smacked around in the Dujes boys. They've been around for a while. They know what it takes to make a run in this league, and they did get beat pretty badly. So they got a big game coming up next week, and I want to see what kind of statement they make next week and going forward.
Yeah, Owen, I'll let you jump right in. I'll save my comments for the end. No, I'm kidding. Owen, your favorite 1-1 team?
Similar to the reason of Ian, I would say Lob City. Once again, this team knows how to win. They just struggled in this week, going down with one injury. Someone didn't play tonight, or last night rather. But I still think they're one of the best teams in this league, and they had a tough week 2 matchup against the Game Breakers.
Yeah, no, they'll look to get back on track in week 3 against the Ice Treys. So 2 of these 1-1 teams facing off. All right, Zach, you're up. All right, this is now, listen, it's your first time on the Postgame Show. Play your cards right? This is your chance. All right, your favorite 1-1 team.
I'll be the suck up, halfway crooks.
Good choice.
Well, they're 1-1, but their first loss last week, it was a close game with the Rhode Island Warriors, which are 2-0 and are one of the better teams. So I think because of that, they'll be able to. And Spence, he's a character, but when he's playing, he's lighthearted. He's not taking it seriously, and I think that actually helps. He's having fun, and I think the rest of the team, it kind of helps them too.
For sure. I know I call him a clown, and obviously it's not, meant in a mean way, but some Spence clown shirts, I mean, people would buy them, put a little clown. I mean, I'm in. I'll wear a little Spence clown shirt. Sydney, your favorite 1-1 team?
I'm also gonna kiss up a little. Crooks. It was a close game the first week, and I feel like using the momentum from week 2 with a big win, I feel like they can carry that and keep going forward with more wins in their back pocket.
Sorry, I was muted. You guys threw me off. I wasn't expecting 2 of you guys to do that. Now I'm putting Ian back on the spot, who went first. This actually works out well. He saw the Ice Treys this week. So I'm going to make you make the case for the one team that we didn't talk about yet, the Ice Treys, right? So they're 1-1. They sneak out a win in week 2. Their week 3 matchup is Lob City. So I know you picked the Dujes boys, and that's okay. But the Ice Treys are the 1-1 team. What do they have going for them, coming out of week 2 with a win?
Yeah, like I said, they had a very physical game, and Lob City is going to be a team to watch out for. So I think one of the key things for them would be stopping that fast break and playing bigger than they are. And let's see what they have next week. They can put up a fight, and if Lob City gets calling back, it will be a good game to watch. So we'll keep an eye out for that.
For sure. All right, so we have the 4 1-1 teams. We talked enough about them. The Low Post podcast will be back this week, and I personally can't wait to listen to what those guys have to say. I mean, it's going to be the highlight of my week, listening to the Dujes boys have to sulk in their, 7-point pick. But again, like you guys talked about, they are going to be a fun team to play a second time and possibly a third time this season, and we'll be there. They will be there come playoff time, that's for sure. They'll be a tough out, especially, I didn't touch on their specific players too much, but a lot of threes from them. I know we said that, and so if they hit more of those, it's a problem. So putting you guys back on the spot one more time, and then we'll wrap it up. I'm gonna have you guys pick a player. So I know we talked a lot about the teams, and kind of in the future we're going to be focusing on the teams because it's going to be a lot of the same themes, right? Lob City's bigger. Spence not shooting threes. No, hopefully we get on another theme with them. The Dujes boys and and Lucas and Desmond, right? How do they work together to both score? Rhode Island Warriors having 2 players, right? And 2 players that carry the load offensively, not that the rest of their team isn't, a huge part of what they've done these first 2 weeks, but just how do their big 2 continue to play, right? So those are going to be the themes. And so that's great. We're going to see a lot of repetition with those. And so focusing on the players that stand out week to week is going to be huge. So even looking at week 2, let's kind of keep it to week 2 and what player in week 2. So kind of throw out week 1 for a second. What player in week 2 stood out or had the biggest flip from what you saw in week 1, but really focusing on those week 2 performances. Owen's been up to the task. All right, we're putting him first. As far as what player in week 2 like righted the ship to their season, and really did something on the court that stood out to you.
I butchered his name last week, but I believe I have it right now. Joseph Sekator. He's the one who played great. He's more than just a dunker. I know you called him out to do the dunk contest, but he does everything on the floor. He finished with 22, and he just does everything on the floor. Although he wasn't super efficient from beyond the arc, he's more than just a dunker, is basically what I'm getting at. And I'm excited to see what he's got in store for the next few weeks.
Yeah, and even 10 for 27, 2 for 15 from 3, and you guys can like nod your heads along, and I'll kind of say if you guys do or not. I mean, a lot of the threes he took were good shots and looked like they were all going in. Same with Desmond Williams on the Duje's boys, right? Like, I mean, of course I'm biased because I thought they were all going in because it's against me, but they really did all look good, and they weren't, forced or like, oh God, that didn't even have a chance to go in, right? So if we're trying to take a positive, yes, and that's a huge part for that team who is smaller. So hitting some threes is going to be huge. And the way they play, getting out and running, if they can stretch you that way, right, in transition, and then also to the 3-point line, they're going to be tough to defend. We'll go back to Sydney for this one. So your player from week 2 that stands out.
I'm going to pick Marvin Dowdell. He's out there. He has a fun time. I really enjoy watching him, but he's still knocking down threes. He had 21 points, but he's also, I feel like, a big playmaker for the team. He only had 2 assists, which seems low, but I feel like he has a lot of vocal leadership on the court and is definitely a key factor for the RI Warriors.
Yeah, and I know we're focusing on week 2. That's a great pick, and not to bring up week 1, but Charles Alexander in foul trouble for 4, 5, or 6 minutes of that fourth quarter against the halfway Crooks, and it was Marvin Dowdell who was able to carry it, and they ended up winning that game in week 1. So, shout out to him. And in week 2, again, another great performance, 21 and 13, 5 made threes. And like he said himself, he's going to shoot it. He doesn't care if he's 0 for whatever, he's going to shoot it. So really good pick. Zach, who do you got from week 2?
I'm staying on the same team. I got Charles Alexander. Like I said before, he was taking a lot of heat check deep, like 30-foot threes, made a couple of them. And also it was at one point, it was close. He almost had more points than he ball, don't lie.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting because like we've talked about, right? And so Charles Alexander really shoots it well, which is a huge part of his game. And then is also like not afraid to attack and just attempt to dunk over whoever. So that's a fun way to play and a huge part of that team. And the Duje's boys never crossed the line on the podcast. Of course, I'm teasing them a lot this week, but my point with that is they're playing the Rhode Island Warriors coming up, right? So it'll be interesting to hear kind of their take on that. And then it's going to be interesting to see how the Warriors come out being 2-0, 2 wins. They listen to the stuff too. Okay. So they're gonna be like, oh, we have an article this week. They're talking about us. We're one of the 2 undefeated teams. And the Duje's boys aren't going to care. They're going to come out, and that's going to be a really, really good game. 2 teams that are similarly sized, and we'll see who wins next week between those 2. So I'm excited to hear the lead up to it and see how it plays out. Ian, this is not even a suck up opportunity, but the Crooks did look pretty damn good this week. Go ahead.
It did look pretty good, but although they lost, I'm going to go with Lob City's Jose Mercado. He had 32 points this past game. He took 38 shots and didn't shoot 2 efficiently, but he was a leader on the court and also vocally, and tried to make a push to get him back in the game, although they did come a little short. With Colin back next week and Jose being one of the leaders on that team, I'm excited to see what they have, and he really tried to get them going back, but they just fell short. So I'm hoping they bounce back next week.
Yeah, and I've said this before about Jose on the podcast for sure. And I mean, 32 points and, like you said, was a huge part in them coming back in that game. 23s, as someone who does not have Jose on my team, I'm in. I'm like, this is awesome. He's going to shoot how many times? 20? Like, he's a force when he's going to the basket, right? And so every time he's taken a 3, and I know it's different because they were down, and a lot of those were in the rhythm of the game, but not, I think it's safe to say not 20 of them, right? And so if he's taken that many threes, like as an opponent, it's one of those, trying to think of a good NBA comparison, but it's one of those where you're like, all right, cool. Whether it's Westbrook or somebody like that, like, oh God, he's going to shoot. This is awesome. Like LeBron is perfect. That's exactly who I needed, right? It doesn't matter how old he is. If he's shooting rather than driving as a defense, you're like, okay, like we did it. We just got to get a rebound and like hope he misses and we're good. So it's a relief that way. And I'm sure the game breakers were feeling the same way, especially, you know, obviously when you miss 17 of them, my point is easier to make, but the point is taking that many is not ideal for Lob City, especially without Colin Burns for most of that game, like we talked about. And Greg Holt in his first game back, you know, 1 for 6 from 3, and a lot against Lob City in that game, but credit to the game breakers like we talked about. And that's a good way to bring it all full circle and wrap it up for the post-game show. Everybody, good job over there. Good job. We had some repeat. We'll see. We'll see who comes back next week. We'll see who gets an invite next week to the post-game show. I'm kidding. They all get invited, even if they give the wrong answer and don't pick a halfway crook player. Thanks for watching the week 2 post-game show. We'll see if, you know, after all this, the Crooks we'll see. We'll see how they do. But listen to the Low Post podcast coming up this week if you want the biased version of this show, and listen and stay tuned on our YouTube page for top plays, 2-minute drill. And next Tuesday, we're doing some live streaming so you guys can watch the full game if you can't be at the Johnston Rec Center. Stay tuned for more Legacy Leagues action, and thanks for watching.